Okay, so I'm going to do intros in the interest of time. And also I find that often when people introduce themselves, they're too modest, which I'm not about. I'm all about, you know, championing people and, you know, singing their praises. So we have Jenny Streeter. Come on down. Is somebody going to do that for me? I think Scott's doing it. So Jenny is HR project manager for Real World HR. There she is. Hi, Jenny. And part of the original inspiration for Be the Ripple, no less. And a seasoned HR professional with some really great experience. We had a really good conversation last week. And when we're thinking about safe spaces, you know, places like working in the prison service, maybe spring to mind as something of a challenge. So Jenny's bringing loads of experience to the session today. We're also joined by Dorothy McKinney, who has over 40 years experience in HR and is an expert on mediation, inclusion and team performance. And again, having spoken to her before the event, I can tell you that she's got some really good insights and stories to tell. So hello, Dorothy. Animah Kosai is CEO of Speak Up at Work. I think the title and the name of the organisation probably tells us all we need to know about why she is part of the panel today. And Hemingway, you heard, is the founder of Speak Out Revolution, which again, the kind of the power and all of that behind that probably explains why she's part of this panel today. And she is on a mission to cancel the culture of silence on harassment and bullying in the workplace. Now, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm aware that we're overrunning, so I want to kind of get to the good stuff. But this was born out of a conversation in the week the week following International Women's Day on Monday. Yay! Meghan Markle interview, you know, kind of controversy on the Tuesday, and then the latter half of the week dominated by the Sarah Everard story. And then Mother's Day to round it all off on the Sunday. So myself, I went through a real roller coaster on a personal level that week, and I know many other women did as well. And it felt like something of a tipping point. So Joe had the awesome idea to create a session that was just speaking about women and safe spaces for women. So I just wanted to give everyone on the panel a chance to articulate what does a safe space for women look like for them, and maybe talk about some examples of either work that they've done or things that they've seen in their careers. So Jenny, can I throw that over to you?
Yeah, certainly. So I've been up until a couple of months ago, I've been a civil servant for 21 years. I spent 15 years in the prison service and thought things during that time. But it was actually the elements of that some elements of the environment you expect to be unsafe by their nature. It's a prison, but male dominated and certainly the prison service, a very sexist culture, was something I perhaps wasn't prepared for, being an unsafe environment. I saw some things part of my career. I was 21 in the service and 4 years in the organisation. I was sexually assaulted twice in the workplace, and both times I reported it, and both times I was silenced by some very senior people. And I guess that's made me a real advocate that people have safe spaces, making sure that particularly women are safe in their physically safe themselves in their work environment, because that should be something that shouldn't be something that we have to question, that we have as a right. We should be able to feel physically safe. I know the Sarah Everard things brought up a lot around people feeling safe to walk places and stuff, but actually I think I've known of lots of people throughout my career and myself where I've not felt physically safe in my work environment, and that's pretty scary when you're in that position.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like hierarchy of needs, you know, it's right up there, isn't it? Or right at the bottom where, you know, with where the critical mass should be. You know, that's and thank, you know, that's really brave, Jenny. Thank you for sharing that. Dorothy, what does it mean to you? Because you've kind of seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's fair to say as well.
Yeah, and I guess maybe if I give an example of something that I ended up being involved with, and that might help think about that. And I had a friend whose daughter was in a violent relationship, and she sought advice from me because I was HR, for goodness sake, how would I know, in terms of how one might help her at her work, because she was being disciplined at work for her sickness absence. And I learned an awful lot about domestic abuse and what you do and you don't do, and how you can support individuals, mainly women, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men. So I went back into my workplace and I talked to my team about it, and I talked to my team about what can we do. We need to be recognizing that issues that we are addressing and supporting managers with, and an HR team, we need to be thinking about these alternative reasons as to why women have the absence levels they have, etc. So we talked about it. My team talked about it. They talked to other people in the workplace. They chatted over coffee. And one day, one of my team ran through to my office and she said, we have a lady who is starting to disclose an abusive relationship and I don't know what to do. I said, bring her through. I'll talk to her. She came through and she disclosed some horrific abuse. And having had that conversation, I have never seen anybody change from their body being totally in on themselves, totally head down, all of those things that we all recognize, to then have her shoulders back, her head up. And we talked about how we could help her in the workplace deal with some of the issues that were impacting on her work. And that was just fantastic, because we had all sorts of mechanisms to support her. But she talked about it then. She had never disclosed it at work. She started to tell her colleagues started to speak to other people. And we started to get other women in the workplace saying, yes, I had that as well. So for me, that safe place was, she needed to trust me. If she didn't trust me, nothing would have happened. She needed to feel that I would keep confidential what needed to be kept confidential, but that I also gave the power to her to do what she wanted with it. In my mind, I'm thinking, why didn't you contact the police? Why didn't you? And there are obvious reasons as to why not, but the power was with her as to what happened next. So trust, space, confidentiality, and the power to decide what happens next.
That's super powerful. And Dorothy, can I just ask, because of the situation we all find ourselves in at the moment, do you think that you could have had that same conversation with her in this dynamic? Because sometimes that physical proximity creates a different energy and a different different air of trust, maybe. I don't know. I'm keen to kind of explore that.
Virtual dynamic? Yeah. Well, I'm also a mediator, workplace mediator, and we have. If you'd asked me a year and a bit ago, could you do a mediation over Zoom or whatever, I would have said absolutely not, because you need to be there. However, the mediations are working really, really well, because you're adjusting your techniques, your strategies, and actually, because people are at home, they're in their own safe place. So that is enabling people to open up and say more. So I don't think there would be an issue.
Okay, that's really powerful that they're in their safe space. I'm trying to scribble at the same time. So Animah, can I throw it over to you? What does a safe space for women mean to you? And do you have any examples or stories from your experience?
Well, absolutely. And first of all, I want to talk about men and male allies. And just before you invited me to speak, I had a look at the room that we're in. So we have 21 people who are with us live. Guess how many men have stayed back for the women's space? 4. 4 out. So there were far more men, but a lot of left. Now, what does that say? And I'm like thinking, hey, yeah, I know, Alex, you're one of the 4, and so is Shakil. But it's like, maybe, Joe, thinking back, you should have had the women's panel first and then the one after, because the thing is this, when we're talking about safe space for women, when we're even talking about sexual harassment, the men exit the conversation because they think, oh, this is, or even, violence against women, domestic abuse. They think, oh, this is a woman's issue. It's got nothing to do with us. No, it's a human issue, irrespective of gender, right? And this is the thing that really annoys me, is that where are the men? Now, since Sarah Everard's tragic death a few weeks ago, I've been in conversations, whether it's in places like this or in Clubhouse, talking about the need for male allies. And even within my Clubhouse rooms, I brought in men, particularly from the US, who really talk about toxic masculinity. Now, one of the reasons I got into the issue of sexual harassment is because I saw that this is sexual harassment feels small when you compare it to, rape and murder. But if you look at the rape culture pyramid and, of course, violence against women, what's right there at the bottom? It is exactly the banter Ashton was talking about, right, earlier. So these sort of sexual jokes or racial or sexist banter, which is, in some workplaces, is horrendous. So this is why when we're talking about creating safe spaces in workplaces, there's so much employers can do to address violence against women, but they don't realize that. And the simple thing is addressing things like sexual harassment or racial harassment when we're talking about the killing of people of minority races, right? So the very first thing is there needs to be a clear policy, there needs to be an action, and people need to speak up on the spot. And it shouldn't be the women doing the heavy lifting. I am exhausted of being the one speaking up. And I go, well, I'm going to swear, what the hell are the men? Because men who need to be educated only listen to other men. So we need every man that we know in our workspace, in our lives, we need to educate them and say, you have to stand up when you see another woman being harmed. Whether it is on Twitter, whether, social media, come in and say something. So when a woman is doing #MeToo and this is how I was harmed, and you see some women coming forward and supporting her, the men stay out of the conversation. Unless it is to attack her, it is to abuse her, to troll her. And this is where other men need to come in and back her up and tell those men, this is it. This is not cool. This is not on, and shame those men out of it. And I want to see that happening in the workspace. In a meeting, if a sexist comment is made, let the men call it out, because then they'll go, oh, right? And men aren't doing this enough. And there's reasons behind this. I mean, I can go into hours for how this is with some of my toxic masculinity aware friends, right?
So I have, Animah, I have a follow-up question to that. I've had some interesting conversations with men who I would say are allies as a result of the Sarah Everard conversation. But a lot of them, and this is not an excuse, by the way, if they are exiting the conversation, if they are worried about saying the wrong thing, what advice could we give men are allies but they're not sure of how to express it in the right way, or they don't want to I'll be honest, a couple of weeks ago I felt like burning the patriarchy to the ground. I felt like setting stuff on fire. So when someone's ire is up like that, how does a man enter the conversation or take part in that conversation in a productive way? And I guess, Marie, we haven't heard from you yet as well. So I'm keen to just kind of pick up on that point. So Marie, I don't know if you want to just jump in here, and then Animah, I can come back to you. Oh, you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, no, please. You finish what you were saying, and I'll come in afterwards.
Okay, great.
First of all, I think really, men need to feel, yes, that we want them to be the conversation. So first of all, actually enable that at work and say, men, please step in. But also there has to be man doesn't come in as a rescuer, right? Man comes in. So it's not a savior. It's not that kind of male savior thing, but the man comes in to support. And the first thing is actually to check, are you okay? Right? I mean, the person who's being harmed, are you okay? And actually sort of say, I will come in and support if, you want me to. So that's the thing. And very often the victims will probably go, yes, please. So that's one thing. I've often done it in a context of social media, that men can just come in. The main thing, what they shouldn't do is center themselves, but what they should do is say, look, I want to understand, I'm struggling here. I think I have actually a whole sequence of things that can happen. But I'll hand over to Marie while I sort of just gather my thoughts around that question. Yeah.
And could you just repeat the last question for me?
So I'm keen to understand what safe space for women means to you, my original question, but also on this point about bringing men into the conversation. So if they're worried about saying the wrong thing, and we know we need them as allies, because actually it's really interesting what Animah said there about asking if you were okay. Actually, that's the question that a lot of my male friends and allies did ask me, or have asked me over the last couple of weeks. How are you feeling about this? Are you okay? And that was great, because that led to some conversation about it all. But yeah, what advice could we give men or organizations trying to create these spaces where it's okay to have these conversations?
Absolutely. So I think my response will always be driven by data and insights. And I think the reality is, we don't have a good grasp on what safe spaces look like for women, because we're not really proactively asking the questions and gathering the information to understand what our current baseline looks like. I think from the work that we're doing at Speak Out, what we're seeing, just to pick up on Animah's point around the pyramid of violence against women, for women in the workplace, unfair treatment is disproportionately associated with the fact that they are female, their sex discrimination. And I think the tolerance of, we face everyday sexism, right? It's embedded within our culture. And where we tolerate this in the workplace, it's the spark that lights the fire for sexual harassment. And, just looking at some of the data that we have around sexual harassment, I have it up on my screen now. 71% of women who report to us on their sexual harassment don't formally report it to their organizations. So companies don't understand the extent of the challenges that exist. And where we do see reports for sexual harassment against women, I know that we're talking about it not being a gendered issue, but violence against women, particularly in the workplace, what we're seeing is gendered. It's male violence against women. 75% of women who report sexual harassment have been sexually harassed by men in positions that are more senior than them. So it is for everybody to tackle, but really, I think if we wanted to optimally create safe spaces for women, we should have far more men on this call than we do have women, because they're the people that can make the difference. In my view. And then how do we create safe spaces? I'm looking at some of the stats or data that we've gathered around what happens when women report sexual harassment. The primary consequence of formally reporting your sexual harassment in your organization is that your complaint is dismissed. So 66% of women who speak up or speak out about sexual harassment have their complaint dismissed, diminished or ignored. So, I mean, there's lots of things that I'm looking at in our data that make me think that we handle this very, very badly.
A very good friend of mine just left a role because of not harassment, just a horrible kind of mansplaining, very typical male dominated kind of culture. And she wrote a great piece about values being more than a poster on the wall. And is it about policy? some real accountability here. And I think, you know, I mean, if you look at International Women's Day, there's all these people doing this on social media, but it's like dead easy to post a selfie, right? But it's, you know, that the actions are a lot harder. So, and then for me, it is about having some kind of, you know, visibility of data, as you say, Marie. But, you know, how do we start to enforce that? Because it's not about the law. And, you know, so I think from a HR point of view, I'm interested to think about, yeah, is it culture, does the policies follow the culture, or does the culture follow the policies, or am I at the wrong tree?
Well, maybe if I could just do my response to that, which would be,
yeah.
If that's okay, two seconds. Policy's great, but policy means nothing, right? Speak Up Revolution are fully focused on outcomes for targets of harassment and bullying. And unless those outcomes are positive for the people that are impacted by this behavior, everything else becomes, in my view, irrelevant. So I think we're going to launch our dashboard, and that is going to identify organizations. It's going to identify routes to resolution, and it's going to have stats against it that offers transparency to these issues. And I think transparency will drive accountability, and that will drive improvements in this space in an optimal way on the organizational or sector level. So, I mean, that's my contribution to the solution. I'm going to crack on everybody else that provides the third-party services.
Animah, you've got your hand up. You're on mute, though.
Okay. Well, yeah, just very quickly, because you were asking as a HR person, here's a very practical thing to implement in your organization. And it's about women in meetings. I think you mentioned mansplaining or man's interrupting. And really, so we've got it on our Instagram. We've got a little list of what you can do, women in meetings and amplifying women in meetings. And very often we all have got used to being interrupted by a man, having our ideas taken credit for. So a man in the meeting says the same thing we did, and everybody applauds him, and we go, oh, hang on. And also the other one is mansplaining. And this is why there's sort of simple steps in meetings where if a woman is speaking and she's being interrupted, you know, everyone else can say, she's not done speaking, let her finish. That's one. And I've adopted really awful mailed attributes. I interrupt a lot, and I had to do it to survive in the oil and gas industry as the only woman in the room. You know, no one was backing me up when I wanted to say something. So the thing is, there are tactics. Just look at women in a meeting, and maybe the first thing you can do, Kate, is have a little timer. Now, it's easier now if you're on Zoom and you have all these meetings. Look at the men, look at the women, and see who takes how much time. How much time does a woman get to speak in a meeting, and how often is she interrupted more than, you know, the men? And if you're busy participating, get someone else who might be able to do it for you. I mean, now we all work from home. It could be, I don't know, one of your kids. Just time it or something like that. I don't know, but that's a fun thing to do. And then you've got data to show. Do you know what's going on in meetings? Let's now address it, and then get everyone to start being aware. Now, some of us, so I'm also with this group called Warrior Women, we're looking at actually now that once COVID, you know, sort of ends and people physically go back to work, can we reframe how meetings work from a female perspective, so that, because we really want women, and then we can also apply that to people of different ethnicities as well, right? That women are being heard, are being seen, and are given credit for what they say in meetings. So there are sort of things that we can look at doing. If anybody's interested in that, just reach out to me, because it's something we do want to develop.
Yeah. What are your thoughts as somebody who's obviously, you know, seeing things like that? Thoughts on that?
Sorry, could you say, I've got children who've just come in and are making a right back.
Oh, mine are down. Mine have just come in downstairs. I'm hoping they stay down there. I mean, Shaquille made the point further up the chat. Policies don't create culture, which I think I'd probably be inclined to agree with. But you know, the question is, how do we create an environment where, you know, men can kind of join in the conversation, but also that we can start to create this accountability and be confident that we will be heard and listened to and not dismissed. I mean, Marie, you've got some in here, but you know, if 71% of cases aren't even getting reported, then there's no faith in the system, or not enough faith. So, you know, what can HR potentially do, whether that's policy or engaging with senior leadership? What can HR do to?
So I think there is stuff HR can do, and I'll come on to that. But the first thing that I would say is I think there's something that we need to do with the younger generations. So I think how we teach our children as young girls what to expect, how to behave, how we teach our boys how to behave. I think we're missing a trick there. We're trying to cure a down the line that it's become so ingrained in our behaviour. I think schools ought to be our focus, and we ought to look at how we teach young people equality right from when they're 4 or 5 years old. Because I'm already in a reasonably good school. I face everyday sexism with my daughters. I have faced issues where my 5-year-old showed each other their private parts, and they just demonized the little boy, made him out to be totally in the wrong, and they victimized her, made her, and actually I think she was just as much the instigator. And how schools handle some of these things, and how they handle when a boy likes a girl and takes it too far, and they say, oh, he's just being mean to you because he fancies you, all those sorts of things that we do, and we perpetuate through society, that until we get those right, I think we're kind of wasting our time at the other end of the sphere. But from an HR perspective, I think policy is important. I don't think it's the answer to everything, but I think it is important that if we can't get that right, we've not got much chance of the rest of it, and we don't always even get the tone and language right in our policies. And the bit about equality impact assessment on policies being crucially important, and not just doing it as a tick box exercise or ticking and saying there's absolutely no impact on anyone, which I see frequently. If we actually thought through the impact of our policies properly on a diverse range of people, I think we would start to make some positive action to try and address things as we went through.
Yeah, 100%. I'm furiously scribbling here. Dorothy, can I throw that over to you as well to get your input, please?
Yeah. I guess what I was mulling over was that we need to think about the bystander effect as well. And that's about, if you speak to an individual in a one-to-one and say, if you saw this happening, would you intervene? And they would say yes. However, when you get a group of people together, they're less likely to offer help to a victim when there are other people there. And that then is about supporting. We need the policies, the law, employment law and ACAS tell us we need the policies. We need to comply with them. We need training. And all of that, but that is the ticking of the box, isn't it? People aren't going to behave differently unless we do other things. So for me, it's about the conversations, and interesting doing, delivering dignity and respect workshops to a whole range of individuals, and just getting people to think through, do you think this behaviour, whatever it is appropriate, and having the conversation and supporting people to kind of reassure people that their own healthy attitudes are shared by the majority. It's the minority that have the unhealthy attitude. But if you're in a group of people, and I remember doing one workshop and having a very senior individual actually disclose in that workshop that if he was by himself, he would address an issue. But if he was with his peer group, he probably wouldn't. And that was significant, and that definitely brings out, we need more conversations. And that's what today's been all about, having the conversations, being open, giving our examples, sharing the heart and the emotion with it, and having an impact. And we need to have that impact on men and women, and have more men in our gang, speaking up and saying the right thing, and supporting them to know how to do that in a non-confrontational way, that they'll do it again and not be criticised or excluded from their wee gang for speaking up. We gang. That doesn't
I love,
sound very good.
I love that.
Big gang.
I'm conscious of time, but could I just ask each of you just to leave us with an action point on just what we can do? I mean, you know, organisations like Marks and Spencer's have come out in the light of the Sarah Everard thing and said, you know, we will create a safe space for you if you are in trouble. Come into one of our stores, and I think that the ethos of that is great. There's a lot of work that needs to be done underneath that, but it's great to see organisations becoming more empathetic and more tuned into this as an issue. But what can we do? So if people have you know, a parting shot that we'd like to take away, and obviously no pressure, but we're wrapping up the whole afternoon. You know, what would you say? Animah, can I come to you first?
Yeah, I would encourage that organizations, even at a micro level, so within teams, within departments, so that they regularly have what they call safe space conversations. But to do that, they need to be trained, because not everybody's going to understand how it works. But I think it's very important that teams within themselves can have these open conversations, a bit like what we heard today when we heard some of the stories, Lethem, Jonathan, was it Shakil? I can't remember now. But people opening up and sharing these stories in a well-facilitated space. And what that does is that colleagues will start to understand each other a little better. I mean, this is something I did in my in my previous workplace, where we would have conversations around harassment and bullying, and therefore people felt they could open up and say, oh, you know, when you said that to me, I think that's harassment because you didn't respect me. People were becoming more open. So it wasn't something that they needed to go marching off to HR about, because they could resolve it at a very level very early on, and comfortably so. Or witnesses would see something, go, hey, that's wrong, that's hurtful. So then they just stop it on the spot. So I think the more you do that, you have those conversations and have the safe space conversations and normalize it, and people feel safe to open up. So that's me. Yeah,
that's a great word, normalize. Thanks, Animah. Marie, what would you say to kind of wrap up, or what your parting thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I've just been thinking about what are the two quick things that I would do if I worked in an organization that don't cost anything other than time and resource. And it, you know, it definitely doesn't solve the problem, but mitigates, I think, a fair chunk of it. One is, you know, if you have a mum that is anything like mine, we're told day in, day out, don't walk down a dark street on your own, don't go with strangers. Nobody ever warns you about going to work. And actually, the biggest risk for me, maybe 10 years ago, given my age and my workplace environment, was sexual harassment. Nobody ever told me that. And actually, I think a good thing that we can do is proactively educate young women, especially young women who identify as BIPOC, who are most at risk, of what sexual harassment looks like and how it manifests. And you can do that via the Speak Out Revolution dashboard, please, absolutely free. And then the second thing that I would do is, and I recommend it anyway, if you employ a woman at the earliest point, even in the recruitment process, give her an informal female mentor within the organization as senior as possible, because that's, you know, without having a safe space training that Animah's talked about, having that informal connection to a woman that has likely been sexually harassed before, likely faced everyday sexism, likely gone through all of those things, means that they have a connection to have that conversation should they need it. They're the two things that I would be looking at if I was working for an organization.
That's I love the mentor thing. I mean, I'm very big on all that, but I think that's, you know, feeling like they have somebody that they could reach out to is really great advice. Jenny, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, just, I mean, I agree completely with what Animah and Marie have already said around the creating safe spaces. I think there's something, and I'm going to steal Kirsty Mack's lines of it's about listening to people, really, really listening and being prepared to hear, even if it's a difficult message, even if it's something that's going to be difficult to deal with, and being prepared to listen and respond appropriately, and learning what that appropriate response is, whether that be as a female, as a man, as whatever. being prepared to actually learn enough about whatever the subject matter is that you can respond appropriately. And if you don't know, ask. So,
Yeah.
Listen and ask to develop your own understanding, and read, educate yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I've just ordered Emma Dabiri's book, you know, published off the back of all the BLM stuff, and I think it's definitely a case of just go, I don't know what I don't know, and it's okay to have all the answers and be proactive about saying that. And you know, I am a woman, and I've had these, you know, people asking me, what do I do, or what should I say, and I'm like, I don't know. You know, so it's not, even if we have that lived experience, we don't necessarily. So Dorothy, no pressure, but bring us home.
My last one, absolutely create the discussion and the dialogue to support healthy views to rise to the surface, because it's the minority who have the unhealthy views. We just don't know it because we don't talk enough. And we know if there's enough people speaking positively and courageously about what's not right, that will become more powerful than the minority.
Positively and courageously. I love that. I think this whole day has been positive and courageous personally. So thank you so much, ladies. What an absolute joy to meet you all and talk to you all today. And I think I am handing back to Alex to take us over the line.
Yeah, wow. Thank you very much. Fantastic conversation. I was contributing a little bit at the side. So
I could see I didn't have time to type and absorb everything that everybody was saying. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a really helpful conversation.